Hello, and welcome to my video on Clot Windows and You. There's a lot to think about when it comes to Clot, and it might be pretty overwhelming, but that's what I'm here for. And that's what this video is here for. More specifically, who is this video for? It's for startup players who newly need to think about when you can install Clot and when you can get rid of it because of a virus. Standard players who've just never been comfortable with that and just hope not to have to think about it too hard. People who love talking about rules and are excited about me putting out a video that's all about rules. And of course, if you're me, thank you for being here. I'm really happy that you're here. Now, my motivation for making this video is that I figured it doesn't just help people with understanding Clot specifically. I think if you really understand Clot Windows, it really means you understand the Netrunner rules. To understand Clot Windows is to understand Netrunner. And here, of course, I'm paraphrasing William Osler, who I think wanted to be best known for revolutionizing medical education by bringing students into the clinics and into the wards. I think he specifically said that that's how he wanted to be known. But he was also deeply racist, and so he's also known for that. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about Clot. We're going to cover what is Clot, what does it do. We have two little sections on Netrunner rules called The Brakes on Netrunner and How Does Anything Ever Happen in Netrunner. Then after we go over the basic rules, we're going to talk about how those basic rules create Clot windows. We're going to have some applied Clot exercises. And then we'll briefly touch on the practical implications of existing and human interaction. So let's go on to section 1. What is Clot? What does it do? So how does the Corp win a game of Netrunner? There's a lot of options. Oftentimes, Corp will have access to more than one way of winning, that they'll sort of use the pressure of one to enable the other and vice versa, and especially if the Corp's deck is good. And one Corp win condition that historically has been very effective is fast advance. And what fast advance is putting an agenda on the table, installing it, and scoring it in the same turn that you install it, such that the runner never gets a turn to go try and get that agenda. Now, there's lots of different ways to do that. You can lower the advancement requirements on the agenda so you don't need as many advancements and clicks to score it. You can move those advancements and clicks faster than usual. Usually it takes you 1 click and 1 credit to advance an agenda, and most agendas are not built to, most advancements cost 3 advancements or more to score, so you can't really score them in 1 turn, but if you can move them faster than normal, you can. And of course, you could also just try and get more clicks than you usually have, and that will also help you fast advance agendas. Now, if you're the runner, how do you fight this? And it really does depend on what tools you have access to in your deck. For instance, if you can take all the Corp's money, fast advancing usually comes with some kind of credit cost. So if the Corp doesn't have money, they can't fast advance. Usually, fast advancing takes some tools. Maybe you can destroy those tools before the Corp can use them. Or, if you don't have access to those things, you can just steal agendas faster than the Corp can score them. They cannot win if you have already won the game. Now, if those aren't enough for you, there is, of course, also Clot, one of the most elegant silver bullet cards ever printed. Now, there's a reason I call it that, one of the most elegant silver bullet cards ever printed. And to talk about that, let's talk about what a silver bullet is. Silver bullet is a card that is extremely potent against a specific card or strategy, but is limited in its other applicability. So, for instance, let's say you were really getting wrecked by Rene Lou Arsenal, and there was a card that did a bunch of damage just to Lou. That card would be great for your Lou matchup, but broadly wouldn't be as useful. And historically, there's been a lot of silver bullets printed. Now, here's some on the screen. Some of them really powerful, some of them not as powerful, some of them shoot literal bullets, some of them broadly considered to be really healthy for the metagame, some of them widely disliked for how damaging they are towards people's ability to do stuff, some of them a bit controversial because they have both those effects. Some of them absolutely worthless, so didn't have any effect on the metagame whatsoever. Now, why I think Clot is so elegant, I'll get into. Firstly, it's definitely a silver bullet because it doesn't do anything else. But why it's so elegant is typically a silver bullet can get into the space where it's oppressive. Now, it can be nice for you to tell your opponent, hey, that strategy you were trying to do, you can't do it anymore. But oftentimes that'll be really not fun for your opponent because they built their deck to do a thing, and you're not only saying you can try, you're not saying, hey, you can try to do your thing, but I'm going to try and do my thing better. You're just saying, oh, you're not allowed to do the thing you wanted to do. And Clot does say that. It says you can't fast advance, but it has built-in counterplay, just built into the basic rules of the game, because you can always purge virus counters to remove Clot from the table. Now, that's sort of basic clotting, but when you get cards like Self-Modifying Code and Simulchip, where the runner can not just install Clot on their turn and say, hey, you can't fast advance next turn, and if you want to fast advance, you have to purge, they can install Clot while you're trying to fast advance. And they can even wait until you're committing your fast advance tools to put a Clot into play. And then you just have the agenda on the table where you weren't even intending to protect it. And, of course, there's also now corp tools that help with that because you don't have to just spend 3 clicks to purge. You can also use cards like Mavirus or the recently rotated CyberX Virus Suite to purge in the middle of a fast advance attempt. Now, this leads to some tricky rule stuff because if you have self-modifying code and Simulchip and these different ways to install Clot at so-called instant speed, but you also have these instant speed ways to get rid of Clot, who would win? Is it whoever's faster? Louder? Is it whoever's bolder? No. To understand the answer, though, we're going to have to get rulesy. Section 2. This section I call the brakes on Netrunner. Have you ever noticed how rare infinite combos are in Netrunner? Now, I love infinite combos. When I was a little baby Netrunner player, I was really fascinated by this card, Cell Portal, from the original core set. And Cell Portal kicked the runner out. If you let that subroutine fire, kick the runner out to the very end of the server. They have to start out from the very beginning. It de-reses itself, so you can't just keep on resing it again and again and again and have that sub-fire again and again and again. But what if you built a server where the server pays to res the Cell Portal, then you get to keep the runner in that server forever, and then maybe flatline them with some ice that's in there or something. I spent a lot of time trying to get that to work. Now, the thing is about Netrunner and infinite combos is that they're really rare. On screen, I have a few of them. I have 4 infinite combos, and this isn't all the infinite combos in Netrunner. I don't think, but it's most of them. Netrunner is not a game where there are a lot of infinite combos. And you might ask yourself, why are infinite combos so rare in Netrunner? And the reason is clicks. One of the most fundamental parts of the game is the basic click actions. You get a certain number of clicks on your turn, and most things that you might want to do cost clicks. And so what that means is that on your turn, even though you can do a bunch of powerful stuff, you're limited to the number of powerful things you can do. And if you're limited in the number of powerful things you can do, that kind of keeps you from going infinite. Now, that's not always the case during runs. A lot of cards that affect runs, like icebreakers, for instance, or ice, don't cost clicks. And so that's why a lot of those infinite combos, if you remember, do involve the run action. We're not talking about runs, though, because we're talking about Clot and fast advance. And you cannot fast advance during a run. Anyway. But anyway, because you have a finite amount of clicks, it's hard to go infinite. There's other ramifications to this, of course. It makes it really good for correspondence Netrunner because everybody mainly acts when they have clicks. Now, there was a few exceptions to that in the original core set, but they were really rare. If you wanted to do something on the runner's turn, if you're the corp, or the corp's turn when you're the runner, you had to have a card that had a special ability that says, hey, hold on, everybody. I've got a thing I want to do. But that kind of changed with one of the first expansions, one of the first big box expansions, the first big box expansion, Creation and Control, which introduced self-modifying code and clone chip. And these gave you the ability to install things whenever you wanted. Now, that was pretty big. And since they've been printed, there have been a lot of cards that do powerful things, not during a click, at any old time you want. And that brings us back to our original question. With all these wacky abilities that theoretically can happen whenever you want, how do we decide what happens when? And the answer to that is in Section 3. How does anything ever happen in Netrunner? So if you go to the comprehensive rules, you will find the sort of timing structure of a turn, timing structure of a run. I have here the this visual timing structure of a run from the Green Level Clearance Discord. You can do a little exclamation mark timing and have this pull up if you're on Green Level Clearance. This just is a very nice visual of the timing window. It's the same as what's explained in the rules. But if you look at this, and we look at the corpse turn, you're not allowed to just do whatever you want whenever you want. There's specific windows that you're allowed to do things. Now, let's talk about some rules truths that these timing windows result in. So our rules truths are click actions, so things that cost a click, happen during an action window. Scoring agendas, resin cards, and paid abilities happen during a paid ability window. Each turn, paid ability windows happen before the first action window, after the last action window, and between each action window. When you have priority during a paid ability window, you can resolve as many abilities as you want before you pass priority to your opponent. The way you leave a paid ability window is both players passing priority in a row. And you can always do paid ability windows during a paid ability window. Sorry, you can always do paid abilities during a paid ability window, but you can't always score agendas and res cards. So let's talk about those individually. So firstly, click actions happen during a action window. Everything else, more or less, happens during a paid ability window. So these are all click actions using any of these cards. By contrast, these, either using a stone ship chart room or using a spin doctor or scoring an off-world office or rezzing a spin doctor, those would all happen during a paid ability window. Now, paid ability windows, if we look at this chart, happen at specific times. So they happen before the draw phase, they happen before an action, a click action, and they happen during the discard phase. So basically they go, you do your draw phase, then you do paid ability window, action, paid ability window, action, paid ability window, action, until you're out of clicks. Now, this is a little bit of a counterintuitive one if you're used to some other game systems. When you have priority during a paid ability window, if it's your turn to do actions, you can do as many abilities as you want before you pass priority to your opponent. So, for instance, on your turn, you can say, I res spin doctor, draw 2, use the spin doctors, remove this asset from the game ability, shuffle 2 cards back, res a second spin doctor, draw 2 more, and then you get to say to your opponent, do you have any actions? And your opponent does not get to do anything until you say, I pass priority back to you. Now, the way you leave a paid ability window, you might still be there to this day, unless you have a way to leave it. And the way you leave a paid ability window is by you both passing priority in a row. So something like this, where the corp reses a card, and then they're going to do a paid ability. It's still their turn because they haven't passed. They're going to use the spin doctor. They pass, and then the runner says, oh, okay, I'm going to use a paid ability window, and I pass back to you. They haven't both passed priority in a row, so they would still be in that paid ability window. The corp would get to do something. The way you leave a paid ability window is by both people passing in a row. So here, the corp's, in this example over here, after the runner passes, the corp passes, which allows you to move on to the next thing that's happening. If this was during, if the corp still had clicks remaining, it would be the corp taking a click action. Now, you can always do paid abilities during a paid ability window, but you can't always score agendas. Now, if you look at this, and you can't always res cards either. If you look at the timing graphic here, the yellows are where you can score an agenda. So you can score an agenda during your draw phase, and you can score an agenda during your action phase, but you can't during discard phase. It's too late to score. And during the runner's turn, there's no opportunity to score agendas during a paid ability window. If you look at the run, there's also no ability to score agendas here. You also notice on here the blue icon represents resin cards, and there's a few paid ability windows where you can just use paid abilities. You can't res cards. Bit weird. And there's some parts of the timing structure of a run where you're not even, there's no paid abilities whatsoever. So when you're breaching a server or accessing a card, there's no opportunities to do paid abilities. Certainly can't score agendas during that time. So those are our rules truths. I did actually, after making these, want to add a sixth one, which is that if it's your turn, you get to act first during any paid ability windows there are. So that's our rules truths. Now, what I want to talk about next is how these rules truths create opportunities to play Clot and to prevent Clot from defeating you. So, section 4, how do the basic rules create Clot windows? Suppose you want to use Biotic Labor to score a 3-2 agenda. It might go like this. You say, oh, Biotic Labor, install the agenda, advance, 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 score. And that all sounds good, but aren't you forgetting something? because you might think you're going biotic labor, install the agenda, advance the agenda, advance the agenda, advance agenda, score the agenda. What you're actually doing is this. You're having your corp paidability window. You're saying pass. The runner says pass. Great. Now you're into, you can do your first clickability, biotic labor, another paidability window. You pass, they pass. Install the agenda because you have another clickability. Another paidability window. You say pass, the runner says pass. Now you get to do another clickability because you've left the paidability window. Advance. Back to the paidability window. Pass, pass. Advance. Back to another paidability window. Pass, pass. Advance. Back to a paidability window. Great, I have an agenda with 3 advancements on it. I'll score it. But there's a lot of places where if the runner had a self-modifying code and the ability to go get a clot, they could have gone and gotten the clot. So all these places are places where the runner could have said, actually, instead of passing, what I'd like to do is install clot. And if, say during this one, after you've played biotic labor and advanced the agenda 2 times and installed it, if they instead use the SMC, the self-modifying code to install clot, you're pretty sad. Now, similarly, when you're actually scoring a trick with a trick of light, instead of just saying install Judge Serum, advance it, trick of light, score, you're actually doing that same thing where you go pass, pass, install, pass, pass, advance, pass, pass, trick of light, score the agenda. So similarly, if the runner, instead of passing, installs clot at the right time, the corp is going to be prevented from scoring their agenda. Another example, when you're scoring a Project Beal, for instance, with a Sansan City Grid, you install the agenda, advance it. That involves some passing. So the runner, during this window that's in purple, if they had installed a clot there, they would have prevented you from scoring. I will say in this one, you can res the Sansan City Grid and score the agenda all in the same window, as long as the clot's not on the table. Now, here's a situation where you have a virus instead. So they have the self-modifying code and the ability to go get the clot. If you're trying to score out this longevity serum and you have a virus installed already, when they go install the agenda, or when you go install the agenda and you go pass, pass, advance the agenda, and you pass, and the runner says, ah ha ha, here's a clot, you get to say, okay, cool. It's now my clickability. I will trick of light. I will res them a virus, trash them a virus, and score the agenda, all during your same paid ability window. And then you pass back to the runner. And the runner is saying, oh my goodness. Because you just did 3 things that they did not have any opportunity to react to, because they were all paid abilities and paid ability speed things that you get to do during your paid ability window. So they were kind of... So that virus kind of was a little bit of a trump card in that situation. Now, little extra question. What if, let's add a simul chip to the table. When could the runner use it to stop the fast advance if you had the virus to knock the clot off the table? Think about that for a second. And the answer to that is trick question. You can't use the simul chip. And the reason why is because at this point, when the corp, when you installed Clot, you had that paid ability window. The Clot is on the table, so you can't get it back with simul chip. That's not the problem. And the next time you, the runner, get priority is over here. It's too late. The agenda's already scored. So in this situation, a simul chip would not help you at all. Interesting. So taking all that, let's do some applied clotting and anti-clotting factors. At this point of the video, please pause it if you need extra time to think, because I think that'll be good for learning. So, some clot problems. Some assumptions that I'd like you to take. As the corp, you want to be doing whatever you can to score the agenda, and if you can't score the agenda, assume the corp or you play in a way that uses few resources as possible. And for the runner, assume the runner will do whatever you can to prevent the scoring of the agenda, and if you can't, assume you play in a way that causes the corp to expend as many resources as possible. All right, so first question. You're trying to fast advance a 3-2 with the help of Trick of Light, but you are worried the runner might interrupt with a Clot install because they have a self-modifying code. Which order is better to play the Trick of Light? Is it better to install the agenda, advance the agenda, and Trick of Light? Or is it better to install the agenda, Trick of Light, and advance the agenda? So take some time to think about that. Pause if you need it. And the answer is that it's superior to install the agenda, advance the agenda, and Trick of Light, as opposed to the other way around. The reason why is because if the runner has the Clot, that's what you were hoping they didn't have, but if they do, if you do it the first way, you've installed the agenda, you've advanced the agenda, you get one more click to do something, and you've used a credit, you've installed the agenda, you're a little sad about that, and that's what you've lost from that play. If you do it the other way around, you install the agenda and Trick of Light, you've also paid one credit, you don't have your Trick of Light anymore, and now that agenda is stranded with 2 advancements. Those advancements came from somewhere, so that's another cost you paid. So I think the first line is a bit superior because it makes you less vulnerable to a Clot. If they Clot you, you can keep your Trick of Light and use it on another agenda when you get the Clot off the table, for instance. All right, here's another question. When to install the Clot? You are the runner. The corp has Vladisibirsk City Grid with 2 advancements and is threatening to fast advance the game-winning hostile takeover, which is a 2-1. When is the latest you can install Clot to block their fast advance? In the paid ability window before they install a card? In the paid ability window after they install a card? Or in the paid ability window after they use Vladisibirsk City Grid? So take some time to think about that. Pause the video if you need to. And the answer is in the paid ability window before they even install a card. Now the reason why is because if you're the corp and you're trying to score a hostile takeover, a game-winning hostile takeover, you have access to this Vladisibirsk City Grid, for example. You can do a lot of things during your paid ability window. So on your first click action, you can install the hostile takeover, and since it's your turn as the corp, you get to go move the counters, score the agenda. And then the runner, if the game hadn't been over, the runner would get to do things, but the agenda's already scored. So you actually need, if you wanted to prevent fast advance against a hostile takeover and a Vladisibirsk, you would need to have the Clot on the table before they even do their first action. You would need to do it during that first paid ability window. All right. Here's another one. You're the corp. You again have a Vladisibirsk City Grid with 2 advancements. You have 17 credits and a hand with Hostile Takeover, Biotic Labor, Trick of Light, and 2 Ganked. The runner has an installed Clot and installed Simulchip. Can you score the Hostile Takeover? So it's a similar situation to the last one. You have the similar tools, the Hostile Takeover and the Vladisibirsk City Grid. But this time the runner has a Clot. You also have, in addition to the Vladisibirsk City Grid, a Biotic Labor, a Trick of Light, some Gankts, if those are useful. Can you score the Hostile Takeover? And how? Take some time to think about that. Pause the video if you need to. And the answer is yeah. Now, if you had a virus, this would be easy. But because you have the biotic labor, you can score the hostile takeover with the following sequence. You install the hostile takeover, play biotic labor. Now you have 3 clicks, purge virus counters, and move the counters and score. Easy peasy. They don't have a chance to use simulchip to get the clot back because you get to move those counters and score all at the same time. Would this combination work? Biotic labor, purge virus counters, install hostile takeover, move the counters and score? No, because there's a paidability window after they purge virus counters where they could put the clot back on the table with the simulchip. All right. Can the corp fast advance the agenda this turn? Now, this last one involves this card, Big Deal. So if you're not familiar with Big Deal, it has a bunch of different wacky things. It ends your action phase. It puts 4 advancement counters all on the agenda all at once, and it says you may score that card. It gives you a special ability to score the card. And so it's a really powerful card because it puts 4 advancements on a card for 1 click, which lets you score stuff like send a message by going install, advance, big deal, 4 more advancements, I'll score it. Yes, please. So that's what we're dealing with. Okay, let's say the corp has 27 credits and 3 clicks, and they have 3 virus installed unresed. In hand, the corp has a big deal and a send the message. The runner has a clot and 3 simulchips installed. Can the corp fast advance the agenda? Take some time to think about it. Pause the video if you need to. Let's find out. The answer is no. Because big deal. Normally, if you had a cool fast advance tool and all these viruses, you could virus and score in the same paidability window. But big deal doesn't quite work like that because it kicks you into your discard phase where you don't have any ability to score agendas. But thankfully, it gives you a special opportunity to score the agenda you just put 4 advancement counters on. But that means you don't get to do a bunch of paidability windows between resolving the text on big deal. And you're going over to your discard phase, so after you do your next paidability windows, there's no time to score the agenda. So you got to get that clot off the table before you play the big deal. And in this specific situation, if everybody's just throwing everything they got at the situation, the corp would go click 1, install, send a message, click 2, advance, send a message, and then they use a virus to trash the clot. They'll say pass. The runner says, oh yeah, let's reinstall the clot, pass back to you. And you'll say, pass back to you after I trash the clot again. Now the reason they're passing is because they want to get out of this paidability window so that they can play the big deal. And the runner is not obliging because they are not simultaneously passing. They're saying, oh, let me get that clot back. They say, oh, fine, I'll use my last virus to get rid of that clot. And the runner says, all right, cool, let's put the clot back. And that big deal, that send a message is stranded because the clot is still on the table. Hope you found that fun. All right, the last section, the practical implications of existing and human interaction, is about less rules, a little bit less rules, and more about how we actually play Netrunner with other people. We're going to talk about how you play Fast Advance and Clot in person, some additional online considerations, and then a little wrap-up. Now, when you're actually playing Netrunner, it would be wild to actually recognize each timing window you're going through. For two reasons. One, it'd be really boring, but two, sometimes your opponent doesn't even know where those timing windows are. Like, for example, which of these sounds like a normal way to play Netrunner? Mandatory draw, install advance, your go? Or no action for me, any action? Mandatory draw, any action? No? Okay, all right, cool, install. No action for me, any action? No? Okay. Advance, no action for me, any action? No? Okay. Advance, no action for me, any action? Okay, I discard 0 cards. No action for me, any action? No? Okay, great, it's your turn. Now, that's what the rules say that you have to do to get through a turn. Now, we don't play like that. Don't do that. You want to use shortcuts. You want to shortcut through the timing windows. But how do you play the game with those shortcuts but not skip over the important ones? Because as we saw in the previous sections, there's a lot of important timing windows where Clot might be super relevant or other cards. So firstly, if you're the corp, ask, what could the runner do during a paid ability window that I care about? So if you're thinking about Fast Advance, you're worried about paid ability windows that could install Clot. There's a lot of them. And if you're worried about something else, what can just generally thinking about what can the runner do or the corp do during a paid ability window? And if they don't have any paid abilities, you see they don't have any paid abilities that matter, that could matter, that have the possibility to matter, just skip ahead. It's fine. But if you're not sure, or they definitely do have some things that they might want to do, you're going to need to check in. Now, if you're the runner with regard to Fast Advance, does it look like the corp might be interested in fast advancing? Some corps don't really have a fast advance threat. Can you actually install a Clot? Would you like to pretend you can install a Clot? If you answered yes to any of those questions, just ask the corp not to speed through the paid ability windows. And I will mention again that, like it says on this slide, you don't have to have a Clot to pretend you have a Clot. Now, when I say checking in, what does that look like? Now, if you want to communicate unambiguously well, you want to ask your opponent if they have anything they want to do during key windows. So you can say any actions, and when I say key windows, maybe after you install something, after you advance something, but still have clicks. You don't want to do it when it's not really likely that they will want to do something. You definitely shouldn't ask during a paid ability window before you do the things you want to do. And the reason why, here's another bonus puzzle. Assuming you want to be kind of a jerk, what is the play? Your opponent is on corp and doesn't really understand paid ability windows, but they know you're supposed to say action before scoring via fast advance. That's the polite thing to do. What's the sickest way to respond when they go install, advance, biotic labor, advance, and then say action? Now you could use the paid ability window to install Clot, even though it is too late. Or you could repeat action back at them in a sarcastic voice. Or you could say no action. And when they try to score their agenda, point out that since they passed priority to you, and you passed it back without doing anything, they are now in the discard phase, and there's no opportunity to score. I think the sickest one is that. Now, so I think the moral of that is, don't say action, because that sort of implies that you're passing priority to them. So if you have things you want to do, don't ask yet. Now, what if you don't want to give away that you're about to fast advance by saying, hey, action? And a simple solution to that is you don't have to just check in when you're actually fast advancing. You can check in whenever. If you install a card and advance it, and you say action, it could be an agenda, it could be an upgrade, an asset, an advanceable ice. The runner can't tell. So try and mix it up. Now, a trickier question, when it comes to playing against your opponent, what if you don't want to nudge them? Because, part of Netrunner is trying to influence your opponent to do the things you want them to do and not do the things you don't want them to do. What if you don't want to nudge them towards doing stuff? What if you don't want to say any action because you don't want to remind them that they have actions? Because if you look across their table and say, that Gachapon could get their Clot. If you say any action, that might remind them that Gachapon could get the Clot. What if you don't want to give them that hint? Now, there is another option, and that option is waiting. But waiting is complicated. So how waiting works is instead of saying any action, you just mentally count to some number in your head. And if they don't do anything, you assume they are passing, and you can go ahead. So you can install and just wait. And it'll work most of the time. But how can it go wrong? Now, let's say you're a Netrunner player using the sick technique of waiting, and you wait your 5 seconds, and you think, my opponent doesn't have anything they want to do during this paid ability window. But what if your opponent is actually counting their credits? Or taking a little nap? Or thinking about other card games? That'll be a tough situation, because when you fast advance the agenda, they'll say, but you skipped past my turn. You didn't even ask me if I wanted to do anything. That is just a really ugly situation. In that situation, it's time to call a judge. And to talk about what would happen in this situation, if we look at the organized play policies, which sort of talk about how to resolve issues that come up in a game of Netrunner, the organized play policies at the moment don't actually have an explicit direction on how to rule when two players, through miscommunication about their shortcutting, skip through an important window. So there'd be a little bit of judge discretion. I can tell you how I would probably rule on it, which is since there was this ambiguity, we'd rewind the game to the last point where the players were on the same page and play from there. Possibly, if hidden information was revealed, you might give a warning to the person for revealing hidden information, though I would be a little reluctant to give out that warning. That seems a little punitive, especially at a casual event. That's probably how I'd rule on it. I'd expect most judges would rule on it that way. But that ruling is gonna get people might still be a little upset, because on one person is gonna say, oh, they didn't have an action and they only wanted the Clot after they saw that it was an agenda. Now that they know that it's an agenda, they want a Clot. And the other player, if they were actually just thinking about the brown-headed cowbird, they might be a little peeved that the person skipped through their ability to act, and now they're acting all grumpy, and the judge is just having a bad time because they wanted everybody to have a good time, and now they're not having a good time. That's a bad situation. Now, how can you avoid this? If you're using waiting to be a stand-in for saying any action, just look at your opponent to make sure they're paying attention. And And if you're the player who does have relevant actions during key paid ability windows, it might be helpful to remind your opponent to check in with you. And that'll help. Yeah. I think this is a really great game, and sometimes situations come up that are a little ugly, and it's nice to think about what we can do to prevent them from happening. Now, so in general, when in doubt, talk it out. And of course, if timing windows are something you don't know, just ask your opponent to go a little slow. And if your game situation has gone to fudge, do not fret, just call a judge. I wrote all those myself. All right, now online, things are a little trickier because in person you have verbal and nonverbal communication to help communicate. It's a lot easier to notice if your opponent's taking a little nap. So if you're in that situation, there's some extra advice, some online Clot advice. Don't be afraid to rewind things if the opponent skips your paid ability window, especially if it's important. Don't count on just waiting to communicate passing. I think that one's a little controversial because I think just waiting is the best way to communicate or to look for your opponent passing without giving away anything. So, but at the same time, you don't know if your opponent is actually paying attention because you can't see them. Do remind your opponent to slow down if you have potential actions. You can do a quick N for no actions. I've seen some players that are very efficient with that. It's really nice. If you're up for it, I think voice chat during Netrunner games really helps with this kind of thing. And lastly, if it's tricky, just call a judge. That's what we're here for. Okay, that's everything I wanted to talk about. So here's my closing thoughts and hopes. Should you play Clot? You don't have to play Clot, even if you're worried about fast advance. I think one of the things that's great about Netrunner is that most of the time, as the runner, there's a lot of different angles of attack on the corp. And so you don't need one card to win the game. And, sometimes Clot can be a little mentally taxing, so you might not want to do that. But my hope with this video is that your decision about whether you play Clot is coming from a place of knowledge and power, not fear. It is 2 influence if you're not Anarch, and that's a great reason not to play Clot. But don't not play Clot because you don't understand how it works. Lastly, I do hope that this talk either entertained you or gave you a better understanding of the rules of Netrunner. Please let me know if I made any mistakes or missed some nuance. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day.